Hey there, I'm Larry with the Tech Buyers Guru, and I've got another product review for you here on the channel today. This time around, it's Corsair's iCUE 465X mid-tower ATX case. Of course, as you can see, I have it here in white, and the iCUE in the name signifies that this is controlled through Corsair's iCUE software. Now, the iCUE software does a whole lot of things, but one of the things it does really well is allow you to set up custom RGB illumination. So that works for peripherals like Corsair's headsets, keyboards, and mice, but it also works for the fans. And this has 3 of the fans right up in front, and it has an integrated RGB controller that syncs with the iCUE software. So that actually adds a lot to the price, and the retail price of this case is $150, which is a lot for a mid-tower case. But you've got to consider the fans and the fan controller and the RGB controller it has integrated into it, and how that factors into the price. Now, given that it's in a similar size class to a number of cases I've recently reviewed on the channel, I'm going to go ahead and throw in my benchmarking components, my standard rig, inside this case and give you a feel for its noise levels and its temperature levels with that standard setup. But I'm also going to be using this case in a special video coming soon on the channel, my 2020 Ryzen gaming PC assembly video, where I walk you through all the steps required to build yourself up a great gaming PC based on a Ryzen CPU and an X570 motherboard. So without further ado, let's take a look at the inside of this case, see what you have, and then I'll build it up and give you the benchmarks and give you my conclusion. So I'll catch you in a second. While looks are subjective, I really like the aesthetics of this case. I think white on white looks fantastic, and that glass panel is nicely spaced off the front of the chassis to allow air in. Taking the glass panel off to peek inside the chassis reveals that it's fairly simple and compact inside, although it does have builder-friendly features like grommets and a number of fan mounts on the top. In the back of the chassis, we have 2 hard drive caddies, which can also hold SSDs, plus another 4 locations for SSDs to be mounted. Then you have the lighting node core, which requires 2 connections, SATA for power and USB for control. It controls the 3 LL120 fans in the chassis. One thing I have to mention about this case is, though it's spec'd for power supplies up to 180 millimeters, that's actually going to be really, really tough. This RM850X is 160 millimeters long, which is pretty short, but with its modular cables attached, it gets quite a bit longer. And you can see that I don't have a ton of space in this case to insert it. With these modular cables being right here, I am really, really tight on space. So if you need to use this hard drive tray in this case, I would recommend nothing longer than a 160 millimeter power supply, and potentially something even shorter than this model, like a 150 or 140 millimeter model. I'm going to go ahead and take out this dual hard drive tray. I do appreciate that it's here for people who need trays like this. I don't. I haven't used hard drives in years. I never will again. I don't want hard drive trays in my systems, and I certainly don't want these cages blocking my airflow and making it hard to cable up my system. Now here's the full system installed in the case. You can see I needed to use a lot of that space for my cables. I have 2 SSDs mounted here, and of course you have all the cables for the lighting node core that's installed in the system. The main compartment looks a lot neater, and I did use braided cables for the power supply. Here are those 3 LL120 fans being controlled by the lighting node core. There's a lot of effects, and I'll show you a couple more later in this video. And here's the case in full effect. It's a really compact case, which I love. I also love the white interior. It really pops nicely with my components inside. Now, I really can't review one of Corsair's iCUE smart cases without showing you the range of color coordination that you can achieve using the iCUE software. I'm just going through a few different patterns here. I'm not going to name them because frankly the names don't really describe what's going on. You can just look at these and decide if these are things that you want in your case. They are pretty neat. There's pretty sophisticated per RGB control that Corsair has achieved with its iCUE system, and you really can't do this with any other addressable RGB system using a motherboard as the controller. My favorite is this one right here. This is actually called Pong, and what you see is that the lights down the middle of the fans are changing colors as the other lights stay constant. This is an example of just how sophisticated Corsair's RGB controls are. You can program individual lights within each fan, and it is pretty amazing. With that said, I'd like to see Corsair do even more with the per LED controls, perhaps projecting images or words and numbers into the fans. I think that's the next step that Corsair could be taking here. Moving on to the benchmarks, which is how cases are typically judged these days. I have 4 cases here, and one of them, the Be Quiet Pure Base 500, is in 2 different orientations with both its solid top and its mesh top. The mesh top is more similar to how the 465X is set up. Note that these are in order of price, with the PS14E on the left being a $60 case, Pure Base 500 being $90, Seta A1 being $120, although it actually came out at $135 when it was launched this week, and then the 465X at $150. What we can see here is that the 465X is a little bit hotter at idle, but it's also very quiet, tying that Seta A1 with its dual 200mm fans. So that's actually quite a good performance from the Corsair. Moving on to the CPU-Z built-in stress test, we see the 465X doing quite well. It is hitting just 63 degrees, which does tie the Pure Base 500 in its mesh top configuration, as well as the Seta A1. Do note that the GPU is a little bit hotter here, but then again, the noise levels are a little bit lower, although the Seta A1 does best it in this regard. Now moving on to the gaming benchmark, where both the CPU and GPU are being taxed, we see the 465X falling somewhere in the middle. The GPU is about as hot as it is in the Pure Base 500. We see 84 degrees, which is all right, but not as cool as the Seta A1. The CPU is also a little bit warmer than both the Seta A1 and the Pure Base 500 with its mesh top. That's a little bit surprising. And then we see the noise levels, luckily, are the lowest in this chart, tied with the Seta A1 at 30 decibels. So that's where I see the strength of the 465X. That glass panel in front does block a lot of the noise, and that is where I measure the noise levels of these cases, right in front of the case. I should note that Corsair has trademarked its term direct airflow path, which I think is a little bit silly. All that means is there isn't a bunch of garbage in between your fans and your CPU and GPU. This is a small case after all, and there isn't a huge drive array in the front of the case. So all of these cases actually have what Corsair would call a direct airflow path. Its case design is not unique in that respect. So you've seen this case inside out, you've seen the benchmarks, and perhaps you've already drawn your own conclusions. But here are my final thoughts on the 465X. Corsair's done a really good job with this case. It actually impressed me more than I thought it would. Now at $150, it's competing with a lot of other cases that have a lot of other features to recommend them, including, for starters, being a lot bigger than this case. I feel that what Corsair is doing is walking a pretty fine line here between offering a feature set that is really value added and then perhaps offering a feature set that people are going to walk away from and decide that wasn't worth paying for. And what it all comes down to is the iCUE integration. They've actually branded this 2 ways in the name. It's the iCUE 465X Smart Case. All right, they are really banking on this feature, and you see it right up in front of you. Those LL120 fans are really quite attractive, and they have a lot of options in terms of lighting, and it all comes down to the iCUE software that you use to program them. Essentially, they are being programmed. Now you can use presets or you can do some manual programming of them, but you have to be interested in that to start with if you're going to jump into a case like this, because you're paying for that feature. The 3 fans plus the lighting node core controller they use are easily worth half the cost of this case. So that means what you're left with other than that is, well, like a $75 mid-tower case. If you're okay with that, the 465X is a winner because it's actually a really good small case. Most impressive actually to me was that Corsair has taken a concept that didn't work out so well in past versions with these glass panels in front. It really cuts off a lot of air, and extended that chassis just a little bit in front to make this perform nearly as well as open air chassis that have kind of open mesh in front. And it's also extremely quiet. That's actually one of the benefits you get from that solid glass panel up in the front. So the performance is there. I think the lighting looks fantastic. Yes, it's $150 for a mid-tower case, but I think that's fine as long as you know what you're getting into. So with that said, my final score on this case is a 4 out of 5. I love the integration that Corsair is providing. I love that ownership experience that it's trying to give you that other manufacturers can't. And that comes from Corsair being in this market for a really long time and being a leader in the market for a really long time. But there are other leaders in the market today, and Corsair has to watch its back. I look forward to seeing what else Corsair can deliver in the case market. The game is not over. 2020 has just begun, and notably Corsair has yet to announce any new cases for this year. This was released in late 2019. I expect that later this year we are going to see some very interesting things from Corsair and perhaps some very different approaches to case design. So stay tuned for that. Of course, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, post your comments down below, and I will catch you next time.